Good evening. We have quite a number of questions that have been sent in to us. So we'll begin with those. This viewer says, I have noticed lately that when people tell me what I should be doing or thinking, it really gets under my skin. Which is understandable. People tend to give advice fairly freely, and they're not you. So it would be pretty difficult for anybody giving you advice to really know what you need. It can happen. In fact, if somebody feels unafraid enough and not needy, in many cases, they can see you better than you can see you. So, occasionally when people say, well, are you telling me you see me better than I see me? Yeah, that's not really an arrogant thing to say if somebody is utterly blinded by emptiness and fear. But most of the time when people give us advice, they're not in that position of seeing us more clearly or being less blind. And so it tends to be like annoying, as you say, get under your skin, because when they give you advice, they're telling you that they pretty much do understand you and what you need. They're saying they understand the genetics, the upbringing that resulted in you being you, that they understand your emotional and spiritual needs, and that they've evaluated all of that and then said, here's the solution. And that would be pretty rarely true. Possible, but pretty rare. And so it tends to be annoying because it's pretty presumptuous of people before they demonstrated an ability to actually see you. You continue saying, I try not to take it personally, which is hard to do because, invariably when people give you advice, they're using that emotion-laden and often accusation-laden word, you. But almost invariably when people talk to us, they're really telling us what they want or what they need rather than talking to us about ourselves, which, gosh, if we understood just that, we'd be offended by a whole lot fewer people. So what people are usually saying is variations on this. When they give us advice, they're saying, here's what has worked for me. Now, if they are living whole, happy, loved, responsible, and loving lives, then it's actually possible that what has worked for them might actually be best for us. But since the great majority of people who give us advice do not live lives that would fall under that description, then, then their advice becomes suspect. They also tend to say with their advice, if you do this my way, then there will be one more person who is proving that my way is right. You notice that there are some people who just cannot stop giving advice, and that's because they collect acolytes, they collect followers like votes. And the more they have, the more people who are on their side, the more right their way or their opinion is. Another thing that people tend to imply when they give advice is, if you don't do it my way, then I'm in this uncomfortable position. I then have to question my way of doing things. See, when somebody insists on being right and you disagree, there are really only a couple ways to go. That's to consider your opinion and even possibly change the way they believe about things. Most people aren't going to choose that one. Or they modify you. And most of us believe that that's a easier course, which in truth it is not. Another thing that they often imply as they give advice is, if you do it my way, then I'll be proven to be useful, even worthwhile, maybe even powerful. So advice giving has all kinds of temptations and all kinds of pitfalls. You continue. What is worse, I have recently literally said to people, please don't tell me what I should do. For once in my life, I plan to do what makes me happy. Understandable that you would respond in that way, and that would tend to irritate almost everybody, because when people offer their advice, almost invariably, they believe that they're genuinely being helpful. They believe that they're being altruistic and kind and sweet and generous. And and that, of course, that they know more than you do. So if you refuse their help, you're denying all of those suppositions, that they're being helpful, that they know more, blah, blah, blah. You're denying them all the potential benefits of being worthwhile and so on. And so that tends to annoy most advice givers. What they're hearing from you is that they're not brilliant, and in response, they tend to, to either say, or with their words or their behavior, pretty much, how dare you be resistant to my wisdom and brilliance. In fact, note that when you said, what did you say here? Please don't tell me what I should do. We have this mistaken belief that if you use the word please, that somehow softens what we say. Usually not. It's the word don't that they'll hear. So please don't tell me what I should do. In effect, you're attempting to control them just as much as they're trying to control you. It's not intentional, but that's how it will be received by the overwhelming majority of people. You continue. Yet they insist on giving me their unsolicited advice, which is often full of fearfulness. Is there some way that I can think about this that will make it easier for me to deal with rather than becoming irritated and losing my happiness? Sure. Keep in mind as I answer your question that I'm not trying to tell you what to do here either. But you did ask, and so I'll give you some options. Now, there's a difference between advice giving, you should do this, or controlling, you'd better do this, and simply answering your question, which is there a better way? And I'm not even going to tell you that these are the best ways. But I can tell you that they have worked for, a great many people. And at least they're options. They're options you may not have seen or considered. So in advising people, which we're really tempted to do as wise men and women, people present a problem, we go, well, now, do this. And I know there are times even on the video chats that I appear to be very quick to tell people what to do. It's a different thing than giving advice in the real world. When people write and say, what should I do? Well, then I'd be glad to provide options and to describe the disadvantages of, one course of action and the advantages of others, or just to supply options you might not have seen. But I have no need to control you. And if you decide, well, that's just stupid, whatever I'm about to say, and you don't want to do it, I'm not attached to that. So with that long premise, and I only make it a long premise because you were talking about people giving you advice, let's assume that somebody who's giving you advice does so just briefly. They say, well, I think you should wear blue. The shortest thing that I have found is that, now remember, it's about love, it's not a technique, is the person who's giving advice needs to feel heard. They need to feel like you're actually listening to them. And so a short answer that might keep you from feeling controlled and demonstrates to them that at least you're considering what they're saying is to simply say, well, thanks for that. I appreciate that suggestion. You're done. 90% of the time, the person who's giving you advice feels important, feels listened to. You don't convey whether you're going to do it or not do it, and that's usually the end of it. Now, again, this is not a trick. It's not a technique. It's not like, well, thank you to get it over with. The attitude's everything. Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, what if they keep it up? Because some people do that. They give you advice, you say thanks, and then they keep giving it. Either more advice or they keep repeating the same piece. So at that point, what do you do? Because if it's making you crazy, staying there and continuing to listen to it will simply be more than you can handle. The goal is not to shut them up. It's to clearly state where you are. If you ask them to stop talking, they're going to feel controlled. So you can, and there's lots of ways to say this. I'm just giving you a couple. You might say, for example, I appreciate that. I've got pretty much all the information that I need to help me make that decision. So thanks. Most people will get it from that. 98% of people will go, all right, he's heard me. He's heard all he wants to hear, and we're done. Or you might say something like, if they really keep going, and say, I think I've pretty much decided what I'm going to do now at this point, but I appreciate your input. It's about as polite a way as you can say, I'm done. I'm done listening. You're not telling them to shut up. You're saying you are done, which is different than trying to control them. Some people will still keep it up. Some people will push you. They'll even after they give you advice say, so what are you going to do? And I've seen that more than once. They can't let up with the advice giving. Now they want to make sure you're going to actually do what they told you to do. In which case you can tell them whatever you want. But if it's oppressive to listen to it, don't keep listening. You might say something like, I'm starting to get kind of confused. I'm getting a lot of opinions on this subject. I need some time to think about it, but thanks for your opinion. Very few people will keep it up. If somebody keeps it up after that, which is going to be like less than 1 in 100, then you say, I've got to go. You don't need to tell people why. Now, some of these pushy people will actually ask you why, and you say, there's something pressing I've got to get to. Even if that means watching the paint dry on the side of your house, checking out and making sure the water heater hasn't blown up at home. Whatever. You tell them you have to go. Just the truth. Because if you stay past where you're able to listen, it's not going to go well, is it? Because then you're going to blow up and they're going to get offended, and we know how that goes. So those are just some possibilities you might consider. Here's a viewer who says, I had a talk with my friend and I did not do a good job communicating about the imbalance in our relationship. I can tell you right off that if you talk about an imbalance in a relationship, it's very unlikely that you would have communicated to your friend that your friend was giving too much. So it almost certainly had to do with how you've been giving too much and your friend hasn't been giving enough. Those conversations don't go well because they come across as really critical of who the other person is. You continue. I was giving in order to get something. Now, that part's nice and honest, but still, if you talk about an imbalance, they're going to hear that they were not enough. They haven't given enough in it. You said, I saw that I was resenting her, not giving in the same way that I was giving to her. Now, that's the part that got across to your friend. You can guarantee, be sure of that. And I was jealous of other people that she was giving to. I know this isn't real giving. So when we tell people that what they're giving is not enough as a pattern, it's just unavoidable that they're going to hear that they as human beings are insufficient. And there just aren't very many people walking around who can hear that very well. So it's much easier if you want something to change in a relationship to make individual requests about what you'd like. So, like, if you want your friend to pick up the phone and call you more often, you could say, you can make individual requests. You could say, would you mind calling me sometime this week just to see how I'm doing? That's a request for a call. If you say, I call you a lot more than you call me, you're dead. Individual requests people can hear. Requests to change the pattern of who they are, they don't work. And without meaning to, now husbands do it too, but wives, from my experience of hearing a few thousand people talk, wives tend to say to their husbands, I wish you would be more blank. Thoughtful, sensitive, caring, listening. Oh, honey, what did you think was going to happen with that conversation? I mean, what guy's going to hear that and go, more sensitive? Well, that's a really great suggestion. And then from then on, be more sensitive? You stand a 0% chance of that happening. 0. So why ask? You can discuss how some things make you feel, or should I say better, how you feel under certain circumstances. You can make individual requests, but to request your partner be different in a general overall way, whoa. You want something to change, make a specific request about a conversation. Say in the conversation we had yesterday, I said this, you said this, let's talk about it some more. It's from repeated conversations like that that patterns change. Example, I had a friend years ago, and we lived about an hour and 15 minutes apart. Good friends, very good friends. And when we get on the phone, we talk about getting together, which we did fairly regularly, like once a week or so, maybe every other week. It just almost, well, I would say 4 out of 5 times turned out that the distance, the distance from his house to my house was much farther than the distance from my house to his house. And so most of the time, I ended up going down near where he lived. I was quite aware of the disparity. There were a few times that I wished it were different, that I wished he would make the effort to come up near where I lived as often as I went down there. But, that's just not who he is. Getting in the car and traveling was like some big sacrifice to him. And he gets to make that decision. Now, then I have a decision to make, don't I? Do I want to have a relationship with a friend who regards the distance from his house to mine as greater than from mine to his? Do I want to have a relationship with that person? Or do I find that just insufferable? I chose that everybody has peculiarities. This is one of his. I really enjoyed his company as he did mine. We had a great time when we were together, and I decided it isn't worth fussing about. And so it worked out fine. Those are the kind of decisions we have to make most of the time with other people. Are we willing to take them as they are and then occasionally make requests? If so, with most people, we can have a pretty good relationship. But it's your choice to make. I didn't have to go down. I could have said, this is just too much. And so we wouldn't have gotten together. That could have been the way I could have chosen to go. That would not have been unloving either. It's just simply that I decided I wanted a relationship. I could have decided that I wanted a relationship that was more equitable. That I just wasn't loving enough to unilaterally give. I could have made that choice. That may have been as loving as I could be at the time. As it was, I chose to make the sacrifice, which once I made the decision, there's no big deal. It wasn't like each time I drove, I went, oh, here we are again, or that would have leaked out in a number of ways. You continued, long aside there. Anyway, so you were talking to your friend about how your relationship was not entirely in balance. She quickly severed all contact with me, so it didn't work out so well. She blocked my phone number, quit taking my emails. Yeah, I would say she took it poorly, pretty much as predicted. She heard that what she offered you was somehow wrong. And rather than consider that what you said might be true, because I'm not implying that what you're saying isn't true. I believe you, that it has been inequitable and that you've been giving more than you've been getting. I believe that. But she heard that there was something wrong with her. And she would have been required to examine her behavior if she actually listened to you. She decided she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to look at herself, and it would be easier just to cut you off. I mean, like cutting off a toenail. And that's what most of us do. We hear something we don't like. Well, you only got 2 ways to go. Listen and change, or don't listen, which can either be impugning the message, making it wrong, or killing the messenger. And we've all done both. Certainly I have. You continue. I'm hurt by this because I don't feel loved or valued as our relationship was like 7 years long. She didn't even call me to talk about the problem in the relationship. Does that mean a person doesn't really care about you? Yeah, pretty much. If they found what you said distasteful, if they cared about you, they could just say, that I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm not loving enough to talk about it. That would be reasonable. But to just cut you off and disappear without an explanation, nah, that does show a lack of concern for you. And still, that's very likely all she was capable of doing. So no criticism of her, just an assessment. Wasn't very caring. You continue. My friends say that I should let go of caring for my friend as she has walled me out of her life more than once. This time it's the worst. I'm continually being told, don't talk with her, and if you see her at a function, like a meeting or a party or whatever, just ignore her. Don't give love to this person. It seems harsh and unloving, is it? It was adding to my unhappiness as I was resenting my giving and resenting her. I think I need to learn to be more really loving first before I can give, in order to share and have it not be an unhealthy interaction. So what do you do in a relationship like this where you think that the giving is one-sided and where now the other person has just, told you to stick your head in the toilet? So you give what you can, and you give what you choose. It sounds like this relationship wasn't very healthy all along, and that it just sort of took you a while to recognize that. So why would you really choose to be all the way back in it? Where it's this touchy, this sensitive. But you still can choose to give what you're able, which means you just, when you see her, you say hello. You don't avoid her. You may not walk up to her and initiate a conversation because it may be still too painful for you. But recognize that it's because you're not feeling loving enough, not because she is a cold-hearted witch. See? So it's always about us. Do what you're freely able to do, and if it scares you, well, then, back off a little bit and do less. Eventually, as you feel more loved and loving as a result of interacting with more loving people, healthier people, you may choose to initiate contact with her and say, hey, you want to get together for, whatever, licorice, whatever it is you do. And then you may find out she doesn't want to have anything to do with you for the rest of her life. Or you may find out that it's an opportunity to open up a conversation. I had a friend that I had many years ago, and I said something to him once that I couldn't imagine would have been hurtful. In fact, it was an answer to his question. But he wanted to know what I thought about a relationship that he was in, and I was stupid enough in those days to actually tell him. And he did what your friend said. Absolutely cut me off forever. I never want to talk to you for the rest of your life. No kidding. Well, it turns out that, 8-10 years later, long time, I called him and we talked a little bit and our relationship just blossomed. He learned a lot of things in the meantime, so had I. So doesn't mean you have to give up, but you don't have to dive into a situation that you're not prepared for either. So relax. Here's a question. I'm attempting to gain more real love. Hence this is a live question, as opposed to the ones that were sent in, hours to days before. Hence my first chat. But as I am practicing, my husband is dealing with a 3-year-old, and I can hear him yelling, shut up, to the 3-year-old. Yeah, that's fair, isn't it? You're 30 years old and you're screaming, shut up, to a 3-year-old. There's a case of being a bully, huh? So you ask, what is my role now? I have the 7-year-old down here with me. I'm not sure if that is smart, but I'm attempting to relieve some of my husband's stress. When my husband is in the pool drowning and I see him taking my children with him, I feel paralyzed. Well, yeah, of course you do. Here you have this real maternal need to protect your child, to love your child and to teach your child. Now, it turns out that not all of those functions have equal priority. It's our first responsibility to love our children unconditionally. Second, to teach them, although the two are really fairly indivisible. And it's really not our responsibility to protect our children from pain. Now, it is our responsibility to protect our children as much as possible from unnecessary pain. So this is where you get into the muddy area with your husband. Your first allegiance as a human being is not to your children. I know, mothers in the room are going, oh, mine is. Well, that's often the source of many of the problems in marriages. The bedrock of love in a family is the relationship between the two partners. You have to work on that first and do nothing as much as possible to damage that love in the course of trying to, quote, protect, end quote, a child. So let's say you were to go in the room and you were to throw yourself in front of the 3-year-old and say, you can't talk to my child that way. Well, you might stop the argument between the 30-year-old husband, or however old he is, and the 3-year-old. You might stop it temporarily. But two things are going to happen. Oh, as a minimum, maybe way more than two. But he's going to blow up at you and really damage the relationship you have with your husband. The most important gift you can give your children is the love that you share with your husband. No kidding. How do you think they see an example of a healthy, loving relationship? Hello? They see it between you two. So if you go in, like a knight, and cut his head off, how are they going to learn what love is? Second, after you leave the room, who do you think he's going to take his irritation out on? Unless you have a dog that's convenient to kick, he's going to take it out on that kid. Maybe not now, but certainly later tonight, tomorrow, sometime. So we think that, by leaping in and interfering, we're protecting our kids. No, you're really not. You're hurting them, and you're going to end up causing them more grief later on. Remember, the thing that the kid needs most is unconditional love and to be taught. So he needs that from you and needs it from your husband. If you go in and interfere and criticize your husband's going to feel less loved and now less able to love your child. Kind of like in society, we get people who go to prison. And rather than love and teach them, and I'm not saying they don't belong in prison, some violent offenders, that's exactly where they need to go. But rather than loving and teaching them, we put labels on them and we condemn them and we hang them with parole for 20 years and we make them feel worse as human beings. And so it becomes more likely when they get out of prison that they're going to go out and commit another crime. Similar with your husband. If you want to affect the way that he loves your child, love him. Now, what can you do? I'm not suggesting that you just do nothing. Just go, oh, well, too bad. If he's going to yell at the kids, just tough luck. But you wait till it's over. And then later on tonight, do not give in to the urge to say, don't ever speak like that to my child again. Your husband needs to feel loved too. So if you frame it in terms of you care about him, oh, what a difference it can make. So what would that look like? You might say to him, later tonight or even tomorrow, don't do it immediately or he's going to think you're picking on him. Say, I noticed that yesterday or earlier you were talking to Fred, your son, and it looked like one of you or both of you was having a hard time. Notice, no accusation. You're not telling him he's a monster. Not even telling him he made a mistake. You're observing that it just looked difficult. You're caring about him. Just like you would pull over to the side of the road. Somebody's got the hood up in their car, and instead of saying, oh, so you're an idiot and don't know how to fix your car? No. What would you say? You'd say, gosh, it looks like you're having some trouble. Wouldn't you? You wouldn't even presume that you knew the problem. You wouldn't from 50 feet go, oh, well, that's your alternator, because you don't know. But you would ask, looks like you're having a hard time. And the person who's sitting on the side of the road, 9 times out of 10 is going to go, well, dang, thanks for stopping and asking. Then you may be able to help or you may not. But your asking demonstrates concern. Same with your husband. Looks like you're having a hard time with Fred. And he goes, well, that stinking little kid never picks up his toys, or because almost certainly he'll blame the kid, which is fairly comical when a 30-year-old blames his unhappiness on a three-year-old. But we do that kind of stuff as parents all the time. And so you say, well, he really can be thoughtless, speaking about Fred, because you first want to listen to your husband. If you don't demonstrate that you're listening, nothing you say is going to make any dang difference. So you say, yeah, he really can be thoughtless. Leaves his stuff out all the time. So, my experience has been that I do blank. And you tell him what you do with the kid when he does that. Not telling you what to do, but my experience has been that when I get annoyed at him, he just gets more empty and more afraid, and then he doesn't hear a thing I say, and it just goes right down the toilet. So, just a thought, and you do it with just that much investment. Because the more direct you become in telling him, now, that doesn't work, what you did, with Fred. Here's how you need to do it. Your husband's just he's going to go deaf. He's not going to hear you. So, it's just a way. This is pretty funny. This is the same viewer who says, my husband just came down and said, I'm sorry. Said he slipped up, and then he said, hey, why don't you ask, how am I supposed to be loving when my wife is off getting real love all the time? That's pretty hysterical. So notice that by your staying, there are two parts to this. Notice, you stayed out of it, and he came down and apologized. Now, how cool is that? So, on another occasion, you can do exactly what I talked about. Say, I noticed you were having a hard time with Fred, because, see, even though he's apologized, you still haven't dealt with how to do it better. You can do that on tomorrow. But his question is great. So, how am I supposed to be loving when my wife's off getting real love? Include him more in what he's really telling you is, I'm feeling ignored. That's all he's telling you. His question really isn't to me. Well, kind of. But he's telling you, I feel ignored. You go off to these meetings or you're on these phone calls, and where am I? So, including. You come back from a meeting, you get off a phone call, you say, I was just on this call, and I learned that I've been trying to control you our whole marriage. Now, how stupid is that? You think he's going to mind that you're off getting real love when you come home and you tell him things you've learned that you've been doing wrong with him? You're kidding, right? He's going to love it. Next time that you become irritated, he's going to say, why don't you go make one of those real love calls? Kids do this with their parents all the time. I hear this from all over the country. Mom or dad will be irritated, and the little kid will pull on mom's skirt or on dad's pants and go, Mom or Dad, maybe you ought to go make one of those real love calls. That is hysterical when it comes from a 3-year-old. And I hear those stories all the time. So great observations and questions, like genius. Fun stuff. Next viewer says, lately I've been struggling with intense feelings of worthlessness. These feelings stem in part from constantly comparing myself to others. For years before discovering real love, I tried to assuage feelings of worthlessness. You don't see the word assuage written very often. It means lessen. Feelings of worthlessness. By telling myself that if others had been handed my exact set of circumstances, biology and upbringing, they would not have necessarily done any better. But I said this coming from a place of victimhood, rather than a rational assessment of the situation, which ensured that I stay in exactly the same place. So what you say is true. Nobody can know, as I talked about at the beginning of the hour, exactly what it's like to be you. Nor could anybody state with certainty that in your position, as you put it, with your biology, upbringing, circumstances, and so on, could anybody state that they would do better? Which is probably why when I was a teenager. Yeah, I think so. I first saw the first Godfather movie. Oh my goodness. I was in a daze for several days. That movie just knocked me over because I watched these kids who were raised in environments where they were taught that lying, stealing, beating people up, shooting them was like no big thing. In fact, shooting somebody might even be an initiation into the family, so to speak. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, whoa, what would I have done had I been born into one of those families? What would I have done? Would I have done any better? Because up to that point, I harbored the notion that somehow I would always make good choices under any circumstances. Little did I know the disappointment that was yet to follow. But it was quite an awakening for me. Not just what would I have done, but what would anybody do? It really dealt a blow to my arrogance. Not sufficient, obviously, but I thought, man, how dare I judge anybody else and say they should have done better or that I know what they should do? Because I watched that movie and went, whoa, talk about people being molded by the way they were raised. Well, same is true for you. So we can't judge other people harshly because we can't be in their skin. And you can't judge you harshly because we really can't know the total effect of our biology, for one. Who knows? Who knows what the effect of genetics is on our personalities? I have no clue. Nor the really overall effect of how we were raised. So it's kind of like we need to cut ourselves a little slack, you know? And all that really matters is, what am I going to do now? I work with prisoners all the time, and I see people who, considering the way that they were raised, how could they have not gone to prison? So it's almost like when they were 4, their parents should have called the state prison and said, I want to make a reservation, you know, for 14 years from now for my kid. Kid was doomed to go there. But now that we know what led us to where we are, we can begin to make different choices. And we don't need to dwell on the mistakes that got us where we are. Nor do we need to dwell on the mistakes of other people that helped get us where we are. It all becomes information rather than a source of blaming. So you continue. Now, having come to a greater understanding of real love, I see that the details of the past aren't nearly as important as I once thought. And as a result, I'm less likely to automatically blame my circumstances for my failures. But this has led to even greater comparisons and feelings of worthlessness. This is an unusual turn of events, because I blame myself instead. The thought is that if everyone around me is dealing with the same wound of never having been unconditionally loved, I no longer have a valid reason for my behavior and should be doing better. Well, see, you're comparing again to other people. You have no idea whether they're suffering from the same wound. As in, sure, we all suffer from the wound of not feeling loved, but you have no idea the extent of their wound, the depths of their wound, the repetition of their wound, the frequency of the wound, the regularity of the wound, how it was delivered. You don't know that. And really, how many of us really know how we were wounded? I mean, we kind of live with the aftermath, but how many of us recall the day-to-day woundings of people's glances and expressions and tones? I remember virtually none of that for my entire childhood. Most people don't. So can you really assess your wounds compared to others? That's like saying, well, we were both cut with a knife, so we should have equal effects. Well, one of you may have been sliced to a depth of 1/16 of an inch, which is, like a minor paper cut. The other may have been stabbed to the heart and died. So a knife is not a knife. Just as not being loved is not necessarily the same as not being loved. Severity, frequency, all of those things. So you can't compare there, darling. We just don't know that stuff. But the cool thing is, we don't really need to know. All I really need to do is just understand myself. Understand that I'm often selfish. And that almost certainly came from past wounds, but some of it may be biology, some of it may be, well, whatever. Who cares? I just want to gain enough understanding so I don't beat myself up, and now resolve that as I tell the truth about my choices, however they got to be like that, whether it was biology, what was done to me, blah, 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 I tell the truth about my choices, feel sufficiently loved enough that now I can begin to make different choices. So now all that understanding becomes just information as opposed to blaming or excuses. Neither one is productive. Information is. You continue. The feelings of worthlessness manifest as constant anxiety, as they would, and I experience panic attacks. I think what it comes down to is being unable to accept that mistakes are a reflection of emptiness, not who I am as a person. This is really not very complicated. If you were to feel utterly, completely, unconditionally loved from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, would you behave the same? No, you wouldn't. Would it necessarily correct all of your flaws immediately? No, probably not. So how much is genetics? I don't care. But to blame yourself? Mostly our mistakes are a reflection of emptiness. My lies? Why would I ever lie if I felt loved? Silly. Lying would become ridiculous. Why would I ever attack? Why would I act like a victim? Why would I cling or run? And pretty much those are the major mistakes of life, the getting and protecting behaviors. They tend to vanish in the face of love. Now, how are you going to know that? You continue. How can I eliminate the feelings of worthlessness long enough to tell the truth about my mistakes freely and provide the opportunity to be loved? You've got it completely backward. Look what you just said. How do I eliminate worthlessness so that I can tell the truth about myself? Huh? I mean, it's like, that would be like saying, how do I learn to ride a horse well enough so that I can get on one? Huh? No, you get on a horse so that you can learn to ride a horse, not the other way around. Same thing here. You don't eliminate worthlessness to tell the truth. You just tell the truth. And you're thinking, oh, I couldn't do that. Well, honey, it's the only way. That's why it's called faith. You don't understand it before you do it. You just do it. Call somebody you know in the real love community. Get on a conference call, go to a group, whatever, and just say, I commit to you either to tell you the truth about some of my getting and protecting behaviors, some of the ways that I feel worthless. If you don't have the guts today, make a commitment that you will tell the truth about yourself tomorrow or at the next group or whatever, and ask them to hold you accountable. You might even talk to somebody who's been a wise man or wise woman long enough that you say, this terrifies me. Would you mind just asking me some questions about my getting and protecting behaviors? Some people, for example, can't just come out with the truth, but I've discovered that they can say yes or no. So when I say to them, so do you feel like you have been selfish much of your life? Yeah. Well, there are so many varieties of selfishness. So do you have a child? Yeah. Do you sometimes yell at your child? And see, just by my asking questions, and if they don't have children, you go up different directions, then they end up telling a whole lot of truth about themselves, initially just by saying yes or no. So find somebody like that who will help you, and you'll find yourself, wow, it's a hoot. You'll find yourself just blabbering after a while, because the first few times that you tell the truth and you feel accepted, it really increases your faith so that you can do it the next time. Fun. Great question, by the way. Here's a viewer who says, let's see, my two boys, 7 and 3, have become quite angry with each other. There are matches that they conduct, a back and forth match of, you are so stupid, no, you are so stupid, you're a moron, no, you are. Sounds like the conversations between many adults. So look how precocious they are. They're brilliant. They've achieved it at 7 and 3. You get the picture. It seems cute when it's other kids, but when it's mine, it's not so funny. I first get angry and I'm quiet and simply listen to it. Oh, should I mention that we are typically in a car driving? Now I am angry, quiet, and very sad. Sad that I created this mess, but again, I have no clue how I should address the name-calling wars. First, how should I act during the war? Second, how do I address it after the storm has passed? I've asked the 7-year-old if being angry makes him happy, and he says no. And I ask him, is it happiness when you call other people's names? And he says no. We have conversations where he seems to understand, but it happens again, all over again. Oh, honey, you ask him if he's happy when he's calling names, and he says no. But see, if you do that 1 in 20 times, well, then teaching becomes like a roulette wheel for him. It's like completely unpredictable. So in the beginning, you have to stop and teach him. This is awful for parents to hear. Every single time. So you're in a car and one of them says you're stupid. You don't wait until it's escalated to 9, 10, a dozen you're stupids back and forth. You're way too late by then, sweetie. The first time somebody says something unkind, you pull the car over and you say, now, what was it you just said? I said he was stupid. Do you like it? Would you like it if I told you that you were stupid? No. So, if you wouldn't like it if I called you stupid, do you think your brother likes being called stupid? No. Oh, well, I just wondered. So, what do you think? What would be a better choice? Well, he took my, whatever. He took my Cheerios. You say, all right, so what would work better than you're so stupid? And you help him, you teach him, you guide him, which is what we parents are supposed to do, until the 7-year-old goes, oh, well, I could just say, please give me the Cheerios. Well, now, then, of course, your 7-year-old's going to say, but he wouldn't give me the Cheerios. Oh, well, then you ask him more than once before you go straight to you're stupid. Or if you can't handle it between the two of you, you could always ask me. You could say, and it's not tattling. So, see, tattling is when you go to mom and you say, Billy won't give me the Cheerios. That's tattling. It's an entirely different thing when you teach the 7-year-old that he can come to you and say, Mom, Billy has my Cheerios. They were mine. He took them. I've asked him for them. He won't give them to me. How do I handle this? What do I do? And then you, as a brilliant mother, can give him additional options. You can address Billy, the Cheerios thief, as to what would make him a genuinely happier and more loving person. So many things you could do. Now he's asking for help instead of tattling, and you're teaching him how to do it. Do you see the multi-levels of teaching and coolness that are going on here, as opposed to what we usually do, which are unbelievably stupid things like, shut up, quit that, stop that, how many times have I told you not to do that? Billy, give him the Cheerios. You don't want me to stop this car and climb back there. All of those are just completely unhelpful things. But you have to intercede and help them every time. You can't let it go on. And it makes a huge difference in the kids' lives. So thanks for that. Next viewer says, my son does his homework, but he gets totally bent out of shape when we check it and tell him that there's something he needs to look at again. So how do we stop these fits? All right, if he's having a fit, by the time a kid gets to a fit, he's almost invariably had 2, 3, 5, 6 steps before the fit. So he starts to go, that thing, like kids do. After all, did raise a few kids. So as soon as a child does that, see, we ignore that. We say, all right, so let me look at and the kid goes, and then we ignore them and we keep going, so the kids' protestations become louder, more vehement, more angry, and it's because we didn't stop it at the first little. In our family, the instant a child goes, you stop right there, early. You say, so tell me, what do you mean by, What does that mean? Say it in English. I mean, your child is, I think, 8 or 9, as I remember. And so you ask him to translate the little grunt he made into English, and you keep going until he says something like, well, I don't like it that you're checking my homework. See? Now we're having a conversation. Whereas grunts and moans, and that's not a conversation. That's a child acting like a victim. And if we don't stop it, the victimhood grows exponentially. We have to quit it early. So then the child says, you help him, until he says, well, I don't like it when you check my work. So as calm as can be, this is loving and teaching. There is no irritation here. So you just say to him, so why am I checking your homework? And of course, he will say, as all children do when you ask them the why question, because why questions are really kind of stupid, but only when they're followed by your teaching. So you say, why am I checking your homework? And he'll go, I don't know. So you say, let's see, let's go over some of the options. Am I checking your homework so that I will get an award? So that I will get a ribbon from the teacher? So that I get extra dessert? So that I can learn 4th grade math? I mean, and if you do it in a lighthearted enough way, the kid will actually laugh at your answers. He will. And it's ludicrous. All those answers make no sense. So after giving him 5 or 6 options, then you say, so what is the reason that I'm checking your homework? Very often the answer is still, I don't know. So then, after showing him how ludicrous all the other answers are, you say, could it be that I'm helping you because I would like you to understand the material better so that you will be happier? Whoa. Not so he'll get a better grade. Nobody, who cares? Not so the teacher won't be mad at him. Not because, well, it's my job. Parents give all of these stupid answers. Well, it's my job to check your homework. That's very impressive, to a 6-year-old who says, oh, really? Well, I'm sorry. I apologize for getting in the way of you fulfilling your job. No child's going to say that. So you say, so is it possible that I just want to help you to enjoy this more? Because the better you do it, the more you'll enjoy it. Ask him, do you like it when you get an F? Do you like it when the teacher calls on you in class and you don't know the answer? Of course not. So the only reason that I'm helping you right now is so you will enjoy it, so you'll feel more competent and less helpless in class. And in the end, it all comes down to increased happiness. That's why you're helping the kid do the work. And if you explain that really lucidly without this, intense lecture tone that parents usually do, the kid will 95 times out of 100 listen to you and go, well, dang, never thought of that. And then you have to do that kind of discussion, even if you repeat the same phrases, every time the child fusses. And then eventually when a child fusses, all you have to do is say, now, why am I... You just start, and the kid goes, okay, all right, and then let you check the paper. But if we say something only 1 out of 20 times when a kid has a fuss, well, shoot, they're going to have more fusses. It's just kind of what they do. They enjoy being victims, just like we do. Let's see. My 6-year-old, this viewer says, has been asking some tough questions in the last week. Why did God make me? That's a pretty deep question for a kid. Why did God make me? I'm no good for anything. I'd just like to die. That's deep on multiple levels for a 6-year-old. I struggle with how to respond in a loving way to my child. I'm scared to say the wrong thing. So the first thing you do is just listen. Listen. Loving isn't a trick. Listening is probably the most consistently loving act that we can share with anybody. And when a child says things like, I want to kill my brother, we tend to go, oh, now don't talk like that. Oh, well, so now the child has to deal with his or her frustration on their own, and they're not going to talk to you again. We have to really hear. So tell me, why it is you want to kill your brother? And they say, well, he took my Cheerios. Oh, well, that makes sense. Maybe we could both go pick up a knife and kill him together. Just by making light of it, the kid's going to realize, all right, well, killing him for Cheerios might be a little much. You're really listening to the kid. Or you might say, well, that could be pretty frustrating. Here you are eating, and your brother comes along and steals your meal. Yep, I get why you're annoyed. And then teach them more productive ways to respond. But this one's not about responding to a brother. Ask her why she feels that way. That's how you listen. You say, well, tell me why it is that you feel that you'd like to die. Because there's always a reason. Kids don't make this stuff up. For example, it's very likely, let's step back. It's unlikely that a 6-year-old comes to these conclusions on her own. No 6-year-old has already read, Immanuel Kant and the German philosophers and gone, we have nothing but despair to look forward to. So she's gotten this from somewhere. Somebody has in some way demonstrated to her that she's not worthwhile. So you might say, what happened? What happened that made you feel bad? That's the question. There's something that's happened. And if you ask without trying to squelch her feelings, it's very likely that she'll answer. So either somebody did something to her or she made a mistake and then they made her feel bad. So you might say, did somebody say something? Did you make a mistake in some way? And if she says, well, yeah, I flubbed my lines at the first grade play. And you say, well, and then what happened? And you're going to discover the real problem. They laughed at her. Whatever. I've had these conversations with little kids on many occasions, and it comes from somewhere. So just find out what it is. Then admit your part in the mistake, if it was yours, because you may have contributed to that by being critical and kind, sighing, being exasperated, or point out the error of somebody who conveyed that to her. So, if somebody laughed at her, if a teacher laughed when she made a mistake, you might say, so, when I love you, do I ever laugh at you? No. So you say, so if somebody laughs at you, are they thinking about you being happy, or are they thinking about themselves? Themselves. She'll get it. You say, so probably the people who are unkind to you were not feeling very loved or loving themselves, and they just didn't know how to respond to you in a loving way. You're not being critical of those people. You're just explaining this to this little 6-year-old who feels like she should die for making a mistake. And then you tell her you love her. And you demonstrate it. You touch her. You hold her. You sit with her in your lap and hug her and kiss her neck. And when she really feels your love, which is easier with a 6-year-old than when they're 36, then you say, so, do I love you? Yeah, Mommy. Do I love you a lot? Mm-hmm. Do you like it when I love you? Well, and because you brought it up, why did God make me? And God loves you 1,000,000 times more than that. So, God made you because He loved you. Oh, 6-year-olds would just be all over that. You don't need to go into the existential philosophies. Pretty easy stuff. So you really listen, then you love them, and then if you want to teach them about God and people's behavior, well, you can do that in addition. But again, it's always about loving and teaching. So great questions, as usual. We'll meet again a week from today. I look forward to that. And between now and then, remember that it's always about real love. See you in a week.